My name is Elena Brooks. I am 34 years old, and 10 years ago, my mother told me I was no longer her daughter because I married a black man she said was not one of us. 2 weeks ago, she stood on my front porch in Austin with a beige suitcase, a pressed blouse, and a folded sheet of paper in her hand. She had not called on my wedding day. She had not called when my twins were born. She had not called through 10 birthdays, 10 Christmases, or one single ordinary Tuesday when I might have still answered just to hear her voice. But the morning after my husband's company went public, she suddenly remembered my address. She looked older than I expected, but not softer. Her eyes went past me first, scanning the house, the framed school photos by the entryway, the polished hardwood floor, the quiet signs that told her exactly what she had come to measure. Then she lifted that folded paper slightly and said she thought it was finally time to talk about the future of the family. Not my family. The family. Like the last 10 years had been a misunderstanding. Like she had not returned every birthday card I mailed back to me unopened. Like she had not erased me so completely that people in my hometown probably thought I had vanished. What she did not know was that I had spent those same 10 years keeping records. Every returned envelope, every ignored voicemail, every message that proved silence can be deliberate when cruelty is dressed up as principle. She came to my door with a list of what she wanted. I was standing there with 10 years of what she did. And when she finally saw the difference between those two things, the color drained out of her face so fast I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Before I tell you what was on her list and what I placed on the table in front of her, tell me where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Back then, Maplewood, Indiana, was the kind of town where everybody noticed who parked in whose driveway and who sat next to whom in church on Sunday. My mother, Vivian Caldwell, treated that town like an audience she had to impress every day of her life. She ran the house like a stage manager and expected the rest of us to hit our marks. My father, Richard Caldwell, worked long shifts at the auto plant and survived by keeping his head down. My younger sister, Brooke Caldwell, learned early that life was easier when you gave my mother exactly what she wanted. I was the opposite. I was the daughter who asked questions, the one who won a scholarship to Purdue, the one who loved numbers because numbers made sense, even when people did not. That was where I met Jamal Brooks, in a data analytics lab where half the class was pretending to understand the assignment, and he was the only one calm enough to laugh about it. We started as study partners, then coffee after class, then long nights at the library where the conversation somehow shifted from regression models to family history to what kind of life we each wanted to build. Jamal was steady in a way I had never experienced before. He listened without interrupting. He did not need to dominate a room to make it feel safe. He was brilliant, but he never performed it. When he proposed to me in our tiny apartment kitchen after a week of living on takeout and stress, it was simple and honest and exactly right. I said yes before he could even finish asking. I thought calling home would be hard. I did not realize it would be the moment my old life split in two. My mother went silent for several long seconds after I told her. Then she asked whether I had lost my mind. Not whether I was happy, not whether he treated me well, not whether I was sure. She asked me if I understood what people would say. My father picked up the extension and breathed into the line without defending me once. 2 days later, my sister texted to say Mom had been crying ever since and that I needed to stop being selfish. Then the letter came. Cream-colored stationery. My mother's neat handwriting. 4 paragraphs explaining family legacy, community standards, and the burden of shame I was about to bring down on all of them. The last paragraph was the only part that mattered. If I married him, she wrote, I should not expect to walk back through her front door. He was not one of us. I read that sentence over and over until the words lost shape. Then I put the letter in a folder instead of throwing it away. At the time, I told myself I kept it because I was too hurt to decide what else to do. Later, I understood that something inside me already knew I would need proof of where the cruelty had started. Jamal asked me that night if I wanted to postpone the wedding. He said it gently, because he could see the grief on my face and he would have carried that burden with me if I had asked. But I said no. I was not about to let my mother's fear decide the rest of my life. We got married at the courthouse in Austin 6 months later with a handful of friends and Jamal's mother, Gloria Brooks, who flew in from Atlanta with homemade peach cobbler and hugged me like she had known me forever. No one from my side came. I smiled in every photo anyway. It was the happiest day of my life, and it was also the first day I understood that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most will punish you for choosing a life they cannot control. The first year of marriage was not glamorous, but it was real, and I think that is why I loved it so much. Jamal and I lived in a small apartment in Austin with thin walls, unreliable air conditioning, and a kitchen so narrow we had to take turns opening cabinets. He worked long days as a software engineer, then came home and spent most nights building an early version of the payroll automation platform he had been dreaming about since college. I kept my analyst job during the day, studied financial models at night, and helped him test pricing ideas at our tiny kitchen table. We were tired all the time, but we were building something together, and that made even the hard weeks feel meaningful. I still tried with my family in those early years. I mailed my mother a wedding photo with a note that said we were happy and hoped she might someday be happy for us too. 11 days later, it came back stamped, return to sender. I mailed birthday cards to both my parents. Those came back too. I left 4 voicemails for my mother that first year. Each one was careful, polite, almost formal, because I was still trying to leave her a bridge back to me. She never called once. My father sent a single text that said, "Your mother needs time." That was all. No defense. No promise. Just a sentence that turned her cruelty into something I was expected to patiently absorb. Around that time, I started keeping the binder. It was black, simple, nothing dramatic. At first it held only the letter, the returned photo, and the unopened birthday cards. Then I added printed call logs, then screenshots of Facebook posts where my mother presented our family as complete without me in it. Then a message from Brooke to a mutual friend saying I had made my choice and should not expect sympathy. I did not start the binder because I was planning revenge. I started it because I needed something solid to hold on to. My mother was rewriting reality in real time, and I could feel myself being erased if I did not document what was actually happening. Jamal never asked me to stop. He once opened the drawer, saw the growing stack of labeled pages, and asked quietly if keeping it helped. I told him it helped me remember I was not imagining any of this. He nodded and said that made sense. That was Jamal. He never rushed me to be less hurt than I was. Gloria became the one parental presence I had left. She called every Sunday. She mailed us practical things instead of symbolic ones. Towels when she heard ours were falling apart. Grocery gift cards when we were stretching every dollar. A handwritten recipe card tucked into a package with measuring spoons because she had heard me mention I wanted to learn her biscuits. She never pushed, never treated kindness like a performance, and never once made me feel like I had to earn my place in her family. That mattered more than she probably knew. By the second year, Jamal was spending more time on the prototype than on sleep. Small business owners kept running into the same payroll and tax compliance problems, and he was convinced he could build something simple enough to save them from costly mistakes. I understood the numbers behind the problem, so I helped shape the pricing and reporting side. We were not chasing status. We were trying to solve something useful. Somewhere in the middle of all that work, I realized I had stopped checking the mailbox with hope. I checked it like an auditor checks a file now, for evidence, for patterns, for one more record of the silence my mother had chosen. The binder got thicker. My grief got quieter. Neither one disappeared. Our life changed in the most ordinary and miraculous way when our twins were born. Riley came first, loud and furious, like she was offended by the entire concept of being rushed into the world. Noah followed minutes later with the calm expression of someone already resigned to having a dramatic sister. The second I saw them, everything in me shifted. I stopped wondering whether my mother might someday become the woman I needed. I started wondering how to make sure my children never had to earn love the way I once thought I did. I sent ultrasound photos to Indiana when I was 5 months pregnant. They came back. I mailed birth announcements after the twins arrived. Those came back too. I recorded each one in the binder with the date, the item, and the condition of the envelope. One package had clearly been opened and resealed before it was returned. I stared at that strip of clear tape for a long time. Someone in that house had looked at my children's faces and still sent them back. That cut deeper than anything else. Gloria flew in and stayed for nearly 2 weeks after the twins were born. She cooked, cleaned, rocked babies at 3 in the morning, and somehow made our little house feel fuller and calmer at the same time. When Riley was fussy, Gloria would hum old gospel songs under her breath until she settled. When Noah would not sleep, she walked him around the living room and told him stories about Atlanta summers and family reunions, and the first bike Jamal ever crashed into a hedge. She was not doing anything flashy. She was simply there. I remember watching her one morning in the kitchen, holding a baby on each hip with absolute competence, and thinking this is what love looks like when it is not tangled up in ego. Jamal's company grew slowly at first, then all at once. The prototype turned into a product. 4 clients became 12. 12 became 40. He hired his first employee, then 2 more, then a part-time support person because the customer questions never stopped. I kept my day job and did the books at night until it stopped being sustainable. Eventually, I joined full-time and became the person keeping the numbers clean, the runway clear, and the mistakes caught before they became expensive. We moved into a small office. We bought secondhand furniture. We celebrated our first profitable quarter with takeout tacos because that was all we had time for. It was not glamorous. It was earned. At home, our world stayed grounded. Family dinners, Saturday mornings at the park. A ranch-style house in the Austin suburbs once the company could finally support a steadier life. Riley and Noah chalking the driveway, while Jamal grilled burgers in the backyard. The kind of normal I had once been told I was throwing away. Around then, the first signs came that my mother was paying attention again. An old classmate from Indiana texted me out of nowhere to ask if it was true my husband was running a successful tech company. My LinkedIn profile started getting anonymous views from the Maplewood area. Brooke posted vague status updates about how some people forget where they came from once money enters the picture. Even though I had not spoken to her in years, I sent my mother one last birthday card with a photo of the twins tucked inside. It came back opened. Not kept. Not answered. Just opened and returned, as if even the sight of my children had been weighed against pride and rejected. I logged that one in the binder too. By then, I no longer believed silence meant indifference. Silence could be a strategy. And my mother had begun recalculating. By the time Streamline Payroll started attracting serious investor attention, Jamal and I had become very good at moving through pressure without theatrics. He handled product and engineering with the same calm intensity he had always had. I handled the numbers, fundraising models, and the kind of disciplined planning that kept fast growth from turning reckless. When our Series A closed, it felt surreal for about an hour. Then, we both went right back to work because payroll still had to run and clients still needed answers. We bought a better house, yes, But it was not some fantasy mansion. It was a solid home in a good school district with a fenced yard and enough space for the twins to grow up feeling stable. That mattered to us more than looking rich. The attention from Indiana sharpened after that. More anonymous profile views. More weird questions passed through old acquaintances. Then a woman I had known in high school sent me a message that changed everything. She said Brooke had accidentally included her in a family group chat for several days before realizing the mistake. She had taken screenshots because the conversation made her uncomfortable, and she thought I deserved to know. I opened the images in my office after everyone had gone home. My mother and sister were discussing Jamal's company like they were studying a target. They had looked up funding rounds. They were estimating future valuation. Brooke suggested that if the company ever went public, there would be enough money there to solve everybody's problems back in Indiana. My mother asked what the smartest way to approach me would be because, in her words, I was a numbers person and would respond better to specifics than emotion. Brooke replied that they should make a list and layer it carefully so it sounded like family needs, not demands. Mortgage, medical bills, retirement, tuition, monthly support. My father typed once that it did not feel right. My mother answered that I had more money than the entire town would see in a lifetime, and that family helps family. Then the chat went quiet. I read every screenshot 3 times. Not because I was shocked anymore, but because I wanted the exact wording burned into my memory. They were not wondering how to repair 10 years of damage. They were planning an extraction. Brooke reached out to me not long after that, pretending warmth. She said she was passing through Austin and would love to catch up. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop because by then I wanted to see her strategy up close. She arrived overdressed for a casual lunch and started complimenting everything within 30 seconds. My hair, my shoes, my house, even though she had not seen it. Then she began asking questions with the smile of someone trying too hard to seem casual. How many employees did the company have now? Did the kids go to private school? Was Jamal still involved in the day-to-day? Did we plan to stay in Texas permanently? I counted. 31 questions. None of them were, "I am sorry." None of them were, "How have you been?" She even angled her phone toward the parking lot at one point, and I realized she was taking a picture of my car. Cataloging. Reporting back. I answered vaguely and went home with the kind of clarity that only comes when someone finally stops pretending very well. That same week, I called a family attorney. I was not planning to sue anyone. I wanted the structure around my children sealed tight. We set up irrevocable trusts for Riley and Noah and reviewed every possible access point my family might someday try to exploit. The attorney confirmed what I already suspected. No one had a claim to anything. Not legally, not morally, not after a decade of deliberate estrangement. The IPO process began months later and it consumed our lives. Bankers, filings, roadshows, interviews, forecasts. Jamal and I were both exhausted, but there was pride in it too because we knew exactly how much cold coffee and midnight work and private fear had been poured into that moment. The day the company went public, everything changed on paper. Not in our hearts, not in our home. On paper. But paper is exactly where people like my mother start paying attention. That night, the missed calls began. The morning after the IPO, my phone lit up with a cluster of Indiana numbers I had not seen in years. My father left a voicemail first. His voice sounded older and thinner, like time had worn down the edges but not the habits. He said he had seen me on the news and that he was proud of me. Then he said my mother wanted to talk about the future. Even then, even after 10 years, even with all those words sitting there between us, he still found a way to make himself the messenger for her agenda. My mother sent a text 2 days later. It was carefully written and completely empty of remorse. She said life was short and families needed to find a way forward and that there were important things to discuss. Not one sentence acknowledged what she had done. Not one sentence mentioned Jamal by name. Not one sentence said sorry. I screenshotted it and printed it and slid it into the binder behind the group chat screenshots. Then I waited, because by then I knew she was not building toward a conversation. She was building toward an entrance. She arrived on a Tuesday morning just after 10 with a carry-on suitcase and a folded piece of paper in her hand. She stood on my porch like a woman rehearsing dignity. Beige cardigan, pearl studs, a face older than I remembered and somehow just as hard. Her eyes moved past me before she even said hello, taking inventory of the entryway, the hardwood floors, the family photos on the wall. Measuring. That was the word that came to mind. Not looking. Measuring. She said my name like we had spoken the week before. Then she said she thought it was time to discuss the future of the family. I stepped aside and let her in, because there was no version of this story where I was going to protect her from the consequences of finally saying the quiet part out loud. I led her to the kitchen, not the living room. The kitchen had better light, fewer hiding places, and one framed photo on the counter of Gloria with Riley and Noah at the beach, all three of them laughing. My mother saw it immediately and looked away. I poured water for both of us, because coffee is for guests, and she had not earned that word. Then she unfolded the paper. Her handwriting had not changed. Neat bullet points, numbers aligned. She began reading them aloud as if she were presenting a church budget. Retirement security for her and my father. Mortgage payoff for the family home in Maplewood. Medical expenses related to my father's knee and back. College fund support for Brooke's child. Monthly support so the family could maintain stability. No apology before the list. No apology after the list. Just a total. Just a theory that money could leap across 10 years and land where love had failed. When she finished, she set the paper on the table and told me family shares when one member is blessed. That word almost made me laugh. Blessed. As if Jamal and I had stumbled into prosperity without sacrifice. As if she had not spent a decade pretending my family did not exist. I picked up her paper and read the bullet points one more time in silence. Then I set it back down, stood up, walked to my office and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. The binder was heavier than it had any right to be, not because paper weighs so much, but because memory does. I brought it back to the kitchen and laid it on the table beside her list. She frowned and asked what that was. I told her it was my list. Then I opened to the first tab. I did not yell. I did not shake. I read the way I would present a financial report to a boardroom. Clear, sequential, factual. Item 1 was her letter telling me not to return if I married Jamal. I read the keyline out loud and watched something flicker in her face. Item 2 was our wedding photo, returned unopened. Item 3 was her birthday card from the first year of my marriage, stamped return to sender. Item 4 was my father's text saying she needed time. I kept going. Christmas card returned. Voicemail unreturned. Screenshot of a family dinner post that excluded me. Brooke's message to a friend saying I had made my choice. Ultrasound photos returned. Birth announcements returned. I laid some of the envelopes on the table one by one as I read, letting her see the red stamps line up across the wood like evidence in an audit. She tried to interrupt twice, then gave up because there was nothing to interrupt. Facts are hard to fight when they are dated and filed. When I reached the section about the twins, her face tightened. I read the note on the back of the photo I had once mailed her. I told her the children's names she had never asked for. Then I held up the envelope that had been opened and resealed before being returned. I said someone in your house looked at their faces and still sent them back. Her eyes filled with tears. But even then I did not stop, because tears are not repentance. They are often just discomfort wearing a softer costume. She said she had been hurt. She said I had left first. She said people say things when they are upset. I turned to the later tabs and read Brooke's words from the group chat about layering the requests to make them sound reasonable. Then I read my mother's message about how I had more money than the whole town and could afford to help my family. That was when the softness left her face and something uglier came through. She said I had no right to use private conversations against her. I looked right at her and said she had no right to erase my children for 10 years and then arrive with an invoice. The room went dead still after that. She stared at the binder, at the envelopes, at the list she had brought. I could almost see her trying to find a version of the story where she was still the victim. Then the garage door opened and Jamal came in from work early. He saw my mother. He saw the binder. He saw the pages spread across the table. He did not perform outrage. He did what he always does. He crossed the kitchen, set his hand on my shoulder, and stood beside me. My mother looked at him then, really looked at him, maybe for the first honest second in her life. There he was, the man she had declared, not one of us. The man who had built a company with me, raised children with me, stayed gentle without becoming weak, and never once asked me to beg for scraps from people who had abandoned me. He said nothing, and somehow that made the moment stronger. I closed the binder and folded my hands over it. Then I told my mother the truth she had driven all the way to Texas to avoid hearing. I said I was not giving her a dime. Not because I could not afford it, but because money given under manipulation does not heal anything. It only rewards the person who weaponized absence until profit appeared. I told her she did not come because she missed me. She came because the numbers changed. I told her my children would never be taught that love is something you can withhold until a payout makes reconciliation convenient. I told her that if she ever wanted even the smallest chance of knowing Riley and Noah, it would begin with a real apology and years of changed behavior. Not a speech about family obligations and not a folded paper of demands. She asked if I was really going to turn my back on my own mother. I said no. You did that 10 years ago. I am just refusing to finance it. That was the sentence that finally landed. Her face lost color, truly lost it. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just pale in the way people get when the version of themselves they have rehearsed no longer works. She picked up her paper, then set it back down because suddenly it looked ridiculous even to her. She took her suitcase, stood by the door for 1 second like she wanted to say something that could undo the last decade, and failed. Then she walked out. Not slammed, not shouted, just gone. I stood in the kitchen with Jamal's hand still warm on my shoulder and looked at the table covered in proof. I had imagined that moment 100 different ways over the years. In every version, I thought I might feel triumphant. What I actually felt was calm. The kind that only comes when someone finally forces the truth into the open and then loses all power over it. 2 weeks passed after my mother left, and the silence that followed felt different from all the years before. Back then, the silence had been something she used to control the story. Now it belonged to me. I had said everything that mattered. If there was going to be any next step, it would have to come from a place deeper than embarrassment or greed, and I did not believe she had that in her yet. My father called first. Not my mother, not Brooke. My father. He did not speak in circles this time. He said he was sorry for not standing up when it mattered. He said he had opened that photo of the twins years earlier and wanted to keep it, just as I had suspected, but had let my mother force him into sending it back because he did not know how to live with conflict. Then he admitted the ugliest truth of all. Avoiding conflict had become his way of participating in cruelty without having to name it. I respected him for saying that because most people spend their whole lives hiding from that kind of honesty. I did not rush to forgive him. I told him trust and forgiveness were not the same thing. I told him he could start with video calls every other Sunday. No gifts, no money talk, no trying to play Grandpa of the Year after 10 years of absence. He agreed immediately. Riley and Noah met him slowly, carefully, through a screen, with all the caution children naturally have around strangers whose titles do not match their behavior. Brooke texted me once after that. She said I could have just helped and spared everyone the drama. I did not answer because people like Brooke treat accountability as drama when it exposes a plan they thought would work. As for my mother, word got back to me through the same small-town channels she had once relied on so heavily. People in Maplewood had started asking questions she could not dodge anymore. They had seen the company coverage. They had heard enough whispers to understand she had been the one who cut me off, not the other way around. For a woman who had built her entire identity around managing appearances, that kind of social unraveling hit hard. She could no longer present herself as the righteous mother of a difficult daughter. Too many people now understood that she had disowned me over race, pride, and control, then tried to come back when there was wealth attached to my name. That was the real consequence, not public humiliation for the sake of spectacle, but the collapse of the false story she had protected for a decade. My own life did not change much after that, and I mean that in the best possible way. Jamal still worked too much and forgot his coffee in the microwave every other morning. Riley still tried to negotiate bedtime like a union representative. Noah still built impossible towers out of blocks and asked questions no one could answer quickly. Gloria still called every Sunday and sent practical things we did not ask for, and always ended the conversation by telling the kids she loved them first and me second, so I would not accuse her of rank favoritism. That was my family, the one that stayed, the one that showed up before there was anything flashy to gain. And that is the lesson I keep coming back to whenever people talk about forgiveness as if it is the only noble ending. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do is refuse to let someone skip over the damage they caused just because they have finally decided you are worth something to them. Boundaries are not cruelty. Boundaries are often what make healing possible. They teach your children that love is not a debt, that race does not reduce a person's dignity, and that no one gets to disappear during your hardest years and then return only when your life looks profitable. There is a real educational value in that, especially for anyone who grew up being told to keep the peace at any cost. We should teach our communities that prejudice dressed up as tradition is still prejudice. We should teach our children that family is proven by presence, not by blood alone. We should teach ourselves that success does not obligate us to reopen doors for people who only knocked once the house looked expensive. The most useful thing my mother ever taught me was completely accidental. She taught me that records matter, truth matters, patterns matter. And when someone spends years trying to redefine your worth according to their fear, their ego, or their social comfort, you do not have to argue forever. Sometimes all you have to do is tell the truth clearly, protect the life you built, and let the consequences do the rest. I was not disowned because there was something wrong with the man I loved. I was disowned because my mother cared more about the approval of narrow-minded people than the reality of her own daughter's happiness. 10 years later, she stood in my kitchen and learned what that choice had cost her. If this story carries any message I hope people keep, it is this: real family does not wait until your life becomes impressive. Real family loves you when your apartment is tiny, your future is uncertain, and all you have to offer is your honest self. Anything less may share your last name, but it does not deserve your loyalty.